Good morning and welcome to Techniques for Preparing an Efficient, Effective Grant Proposal. Today's webinar from Scientific Publications. My name is Don Norwood and I'm a scientific editor in the department. Today we're going to talk about how to prepare a clear, efficient grant proposal. Given the intense competition for funding, you need every advantage to make your proposal stand out. In a study section, reviewers often see 10 to 15 applications total, so you should always think of ways to make their job easier. That starts with clear, concise writing, so reviewers can quickly understand and appreciate your project, but it also involves presenting information in a way that is easy to navigate and appealing to the eye. Feel free to type any questions in the chat box and I'll try to answer them as we go along. We'll also have some time at the end of the webinar to answer questions. We'll post a recording of this webinar to our department's intranet site, so you can rewatch it later if there's anything that you missed. We'll post PDFs of the slides there as well. I'm going to turn off the camera now so that we can focus on the slides. My focus in this webinar is on NIH grant applications, primarily RZ01 proposals, because the NIH is the leading supporter of studies here, and RZ01 applications are among the most frequently submitted. To start off, we'll look at the NIH formatting requirements for RZ01 applications. Then we'll talk about how you can format your proposal to make it easily accessible to reviewers. We'll conclude by covering some general writing tips that should prove helpful. Practically every granting agency, including the NIH, has a set of mandatory restrictions that applications must meet. And applications that don't meet those restrictions can be rejected outright without review. So it is imperative that you follow the granting agency's requirements when putting together your proposal. Specifically, the NIH has restrictions for the number of pages overall and for individual grant proposal sections, margin size, typefaces, line spacing, and readability. These are the NIH's length limits for R01 proposals. The 12-page limit for the research strategy does not apply to all NIH grant types, however. For example, the research strategy page limit for R03 and R21 applications is 6. Therefore, be sure to check the NIH table of page limits at the NIH's grants and funding website to see the limit for the research strategy and other sections if you're applying for a grant other than an R01. Keep in mind that you cannot use an appendix to add information that belongs in one of these sections in an effort to get around the limits. Here you see the NIH's page size and margin standards. Anything that appears in the margin on a grant proposal will be lost upon submission to the NIH due to the processing method the agency uses between receipt of a proposal and distribution of it for review. One caveat here: don't use any headers or footers in your proposal. The NIH adds headers, footers, page numbers, bookmarks, and tables of contents to grant applications after receipt. As a result, any headers and footers in your proposal will just be removed and replaced after submission. In a few minutes, I'll show you what an 8.5 by 11-inch page with half-inch margins looks like in Microsoft Word. These 4 fonts are recommended but not required by the NIH for grant applications. They all meet the type density requirement of up to 15 characters and spaces per linear inch. They also meet the line spacing requirement of no more than 6 lines per vertical inch when single-spaced. You can use another font as long as the final product meets the NIH's guidelines regarding type density and line spacing. That said, we recommend using Arial. It's the most common one used, it translates to PDFs well, and it's easy on the eyes. Now we're going to switch to Microsoft Word and look at an example. As I described previously, here's what an 8.5 by 11-inch page with half-inch margins looks like in Microsoft Word. Something to keep in mind when making sure your document meets the NIH's spacing requirements is line spacing. There's even a small adjustment in it can make a difference in whether your proposal exceeds their limits. The default line spacing in Microsoft Word is usually 1.08 or 1.15 lines. That's slightly larger than single spacing. If you make sure that your proposal is set to single spacing, it will help maximize the amount of text on each page. Here's how you do that using a Mac. After you select all text under the Edit menu, select the paragraph item under the Format menu. That brings up this window. In the spacing section, which you see here, set the before and after fields to 0 and select single for line spacing. I'm using a Mac to show these and the other steps today, but if you're using a PC, the procedures are very similar. So your proposal meets the NIH space limits. The next question is, have you made your proposal accessible or readable for the reviewers? The NIH highly recommends using headings and subheadings because they improve readability. They also show the hierarchy of your study. The NIH does not specify a format for headings, so you are free to choose your own. To avoid confusion, you should use that format consistently throughout the proposal. Here's an example of a format that works well. You can indent subsection headings and subheadings in line with the text, but just remember that it'll take up extra space, as you see here. Also, you can number headings and subheadings, which would be most effective in very complex proposals with lots of subheading levels. Shown here is an example of numbered headings, with 2 possibilities for subheading format. In particular, using heading and subheading numbers would make cross-referencing different parts of the proposal very easy. Again, whichever format you choose, make sure it's consistent. Grant proposals offer you a little more flexibility than journal articles when it comes to making the reader aware of the most important facts. This includes the use of different text effects and formats. A particular benefit is that you can use these effects and formats to make key information and concepts in your proposal stand out. This will enable reviewers to quickly scan your proposal and recognize important information such as your aims, hypotheses, and preliminary findings, and how your study is significant and innovative. First, you can use different text effects such as underlining, italicizing, and boldface to emphasize key points. Also, you can use different text colors, as the NIH does not have a text color requirement. Just be sure to use colors that appear differently when printed in black and white. Such high contrast colors are the most legible when printed out, which is important for grant reviewers, who often see hard copies of proposals in study sections, also for those who are colorblind. We suggest that you limit the use of color in the text. You can also use bulleted and numbered lists of important information. However, if a list is longer than 4 or 5 items or it's indented, it can take up too much space. A word of caution here is that use of effects such as italics and underlining can be confusing if you also use them in your section headings and subheadings. So be sure to only use these effects for the most important points of emphasis in your proposal and not overuse them. Also, if you make substantial use of boldface, it will increase the width of the text, which may increase the length of your proposal. As in journal articles, tables and figures have a very important purpose in grant proposals, helping readers, in this case reviewers, decipher complex information. You should use a table or figure when it's the most efficient way to present your data, keeping in mind that it should supplement the text, enhancing the reader's understanding of your proposal. Figures and tables also enable you to provide a lot of data, especially from your preliminary studies, in a relatively small space. Figures are ideal for visual representation of data, whereas tables are best for cross-listing data according to different factors or characteristics. Figures and tables should complement the text, so when you use tables and figures, be sure to focus on their size and format. In addition, focus on their placement in the narrative, how the text wraps around them, how they are aligned on the page, their visibility, and how they are grouped. We'll look at some examples of these in a moment. Remember to keep tables and figures, even figures with more than one panel, as simple as possible, so that reviewers won't have to expend too much energy searching for the relevant data. A good rule of thumb for tables and figure legends is to use an 8 or 9 point font. This also applies to text and figures themselves, graphs, diagrams, charts, and table footnotes. Again, be sure to use colors that are distinct when printed out in black and white, and explain which colors correspond to the different grayscale shades in the legend. As I described, this will be helpful to reviewers who do not have access to a color printer or copier, as well as those who are colorblind. Putting figures and tables in your proposal can be frustrating if you're not aware of some settings in Microsoft Word. Aligning figures to the page, a margin, or other object makes the layout look cleaner. Also, you need to make sure that they are easily visible. Let's look at a couple of examples of poor figure placement and compare them with good placement. A good rule of thumb is to insert an illustration immediately after the paragraph in which it is cited the first time. This lets reviewers find it quickly. After you insert an illustration in Word, you should set how text wraps around it. First, select the graphic, as I've done here, and go to the Picture Format tab. Click the Arrange button, and then select Wrap Text. Okay, the technology is again getting the best of us. We have hopefully cleared everything up, and I'll go back to where I was before, hopefully. Okay, my apologies. Now, before we were interrupted, the wrap text setting is how you make sure that the text fits around a figure the way it's supposed to. And that's after you select a figure, you go to the Picture Format tab and the Arrange button and Wrap Text. The setting here is behind text, and so that means that the text on the page is showing up on top of the figure. If you change to in front of text, this is what it looks like. Another setting is in line with text, and it looks like this. It's better than the two previous settings, but it still doesn't make good use of the space available. To make your page look its best, change the wrapped text setting to square. Then you can move the figure to the left or the right margin. Setting the alignment of your illustrations will help you position them well when setting the wrapped text. This also involves 3 steps. Yeah, I'm going to select wrap text to square, as I have already done. Click the figure, go to the Picture Format tab, click the Arrange button, and then the Align button. Then select Align to Margin. Once you do that, you can go to the horizontal setting and select Align Left, as it is set already, Center, and Right. If you set the figure to align to page, it will move the figure off the margin like this. Excuse me, let me get this setting right. And there you see that the figure has gone off the side of the page. So to set it back, we just go back to align to margin and align left. For vertical placement of a figure, I suggest just clicking it and dragging it to where you want it to appear, like so. You've probably noticed that figures inserted into Microsoft Word documents are visible in print layout mode, but not in draft mode. With that in mind, writing grant proposals in print layout mode is a good idea. That way you'll remain aware of where and how your figures appear. For tables, be sure to use the Insert Table task on the Insert tab to create tables. Although inserting a table as a graphics file is not necessarily wrong, it can complicate the grant editing process. Specifically, tables inserted as graphics files would have to be updated in a different program, resaved, and possibly replaced in the grant every time a change is made. Here's how you insert a table in Word. Go to the Insert tab, click the Table button, and select the number of rows and columns. I suggest keeping the initial column width as auto, as this will adjust the table width according to the text in the cells. Similarly, do not put figure legends in the graphics files containing the figures. Instead, insert a text box immediately beneath or beside a figure. This will ensure that the legend can be edited. You can do that in print layout mode by going to the Insert menu and selecting Text Box. Then you draw the text box where you want it to appear. As I showed in the previous example, setting the text wrapping or how text appears around tables and figures will assist in making your illustrations appear in the best way possible. You can also group objects, which is what you want to do to connect figures with their legends. To do so, hold down the Shift key and select the objects you want to group. This can only be done if the objects are not arranged in line with the text. Next, click the Arrange button on the Picture Format tab, and then select Group, which is not down here. There we go. They both have to be selected at the same time. And then you see that a box has been drawn around both the figure and the text box. And you'll have to change the text wrapping for that. Finally, make sure that the text in tables and figure legends can be edited in Word, which will make it easier to control the font size and revise the figures when needed. Another important aspect of making your grant proposal easy to read is use of white space. White space in any document has a crucial role in that it separates sections of text. Beyond that, white space makes a page of text appealing to the reader by keeping the page from being too text dense. A quick glance at a page full of text with very little white space is intimidating and discouraging to a reader. It will not make someone eager to read it. Take this page, for example. That text density makes for tough reading. However, by simply inserting an extra line break between each paragraph, like so, try to get to the correct spot. This will improve the readability of the page greatly. The extra line break in between each paragraph makes the reader's job much easier. Also, finding a logical place to divide the long first paragraph into two shorter paragraphs improves its readability. Sensible use of white space via indentation, paragraph spacing, text alignment, and use of headings will make your proposal easy to read and thus review. A reminder here about margin size. As I said regarding the NIH requirements, 1/2 inch is the minimum margin size. That said, we recommend increasing it to a 0.7 inch or even 1 inch margin. This not only ensures adherence to the NIH guidelines, but also increases the ease of reading your proposal, as wider margins are more pleasing to the eye. Just be aware that wider margins means less space for text, and they can increase your page count. Also, we recommend left justification of all text, in which the left edge of the text is straight, but the right edge is ragged, as you see in the example of good white space use. This type of justification makes reading from the end of one line of text to the beginning of the next much easier, and thus enhances the readability of your proposal. When space is at a premium, just hit return once in between paragraphs and indent them, making sure to use only first line indentation. A ½ inch is a good rule of thumb, but it's not a strict requirement. We also see ¼ inch indentation, which works as well. Here's how you do that in Word. First, highlight the paragraph, or just place the cursor somewhere in the paragraph, and I'll highlight it completely. Then select the downward facing arrowhead on the ruler and slide it to where you want the indentation to appear. Hitting return after the paragraph will automatically indent the following paragraph. To change it back, just slide the arrowhead back. And I'll do that right now. Also, if you indent the first line of each paragraph, you can reduce the amount of space between paragraphs to 0. Other ways to adjust the amount of white space are to change the text alignment and use different heading and subheading formats. If you do not indent the text in your proposal, you should add white space in between each paragraph. The easiest way to do that is to insert line breaks by hitting the return key an extra time, as I did in the previous example. Although adding blank lines between paragraphs can increase the length of a document, it makes it much more visually appealing and thus readable. Using white space in between paragraphs can make your grant proposal easier to read when you have lots of text on the page. Also, if you don't indent the first line of each paragraph, you need space between paragraphs to show the reviewers where each paragraph ends and begins. If the need for more space for text or illustrations arises, you can reduce the amount of space between the paragraphs like so. Go to the Format menu, select Paragraph, and under Spacing, increase the after setting to 6 points. And you see that it's added a little bit of space, but not a full line. So you've done everything we've covered this far to make your proposal meet the NIH length limits, but you still would like to be extra sure that you're not doing anything to make the document longer than it has to be. Thankfully, Microsoft Word has a couple of easy ways to help you save space. They're basically set and forget settings. The first is automatic hyphenation, and the second involves widow-orphan control. When automatic hyphenation is turned on in Microsoft Word, it can save space in your document by automatically hyphenating words at the end of the lines, so that words that would otherwise appear on just one line are instead split between two. You can do so by going to the Tools menu and selecting hyphenation. Then check the box next to Automatically Hyphenate Document. This only works when the Word document is in print layout mode, so be sure that you're in that mode whenever you're trying to make this adjustment. Also, when you see the first line of a paragraph at the very end of a page with the rest of the paragraph appearing on the following page, that single line at the bottom of the first page is called a widow. When the last line of a paragraph is at the very top of a page, that line is called an orphan. Grant proposals look their best when paragraphs are not split like this, but when you need more space, you may have to focus more on fitting everything in than on aesthetics, and thus turn off widow-orphan control. You do that by going to the Format menu and selecting Paragraph. In the Line and Page Breaks window, uncheck the box next to widow-orphan control, as you see here. Now we're going to talk about PDF conversion. Something you want to remember is that if you convert your application to PDF format before submission to the NIH, check the font size after conversion. Some software programs reduce the font size when converting Microsoft Word files to PDFs. Also, make sure the figures appear as they do in the Word document. PDF conversion may cause some misalignment. Now that we've talked about formatting for efficient and reader-friendly grant appearance, let's talk briefly about how writing style can make your proposal appealing to reviewers. A good proposal is organized and that meets reviewers' expectations about where to find the most important information. This in turn will make the review efficient, keeping the reviewers from spending excess time looking for details about your study. Also, a good proposal is clear and direct. You should have a topic sentence in each paragraph, usually at the beginning of the paragraph. The topic sentence should describe the main idea in that paragraph in a way that states your point about that idea. Also, you should use consistent terminology throughout the proposal to prevent any confusion for the readers when they assess your preliminary data and proposed studies. Wordiness is a problem in all types of writing. It's especially problematic in grant proposals because it violates many of the guidelines we've discussed this morning. In particular, wordiness can be confusing and frustrating for the reader, which is exactly the opposite of making a reviewer's job as easy as possible. Finally, wordiness increases word counts. A needlessly high word count is precisely what you don't want when trying to fit your research strategy into a pretty tight space. Always seek to avoid using jargon in your writing. Jargon is almost always wordier than direct terms that people outside your field of expertise will understand, which has the double benefit of saving work for reviewers in that they won't have to try and figure out obscure terminology about an unfamiliar topic. Haphazard use of abbreviations can be a sore spot for reviewers. Abbreviations that are undefined or defined inconsistently cause frustration and confusion, leading to wasted time as reviewers try to decipher the terminology. Make sure to spell out all abbreviations and acronyms at first reference. Generally, you should use abbreviations and acronyms only if they appear in a document at least 5 times. Also, seek help from your colleagues who have attained funding. They have experience that can be invaluable when writing a grant proposal. Having an impartial person not involved in your study look at the proposal will help you find ways in which it can be improved. Furthermore, those who are in your field can point out any potential errors in your study. I know that's a lot of advice to try and follow when you're putting together a grant proposal. Fortunately, scientific publications offer several resources to help you. You can find those resources on our intranet site. You'll find previous webinars from our department that have covered topics such as using tables and figures and avoiding wordiness. Also, you can find some grant writing tips in our newsletter, The Right Stuff. Again, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat box. Furthermore, please don't hesitate to seek our help in writing your proposal. We can provide assistance all along the writing process, from answering questions to one-on-one consultations to editing proposals. Furthermore, we offer several resources for grant writers, including a faculty workshop on writing persuasive R01 proposals and advice for writing them. If you have other questions or need further assistance, you can also reach us by phone or email, or feel free to drop by our offices. We're in 1MC on floor 16. Okay. Last thing I want to mention is that the Format Attachments page at the NIH Grants and Funding website is available because it lists the formatting requirements for R01 and other proposals. The URL for that page is shown here in the second reference. Below that is the URL for the NIH's table of page limits for grant applications. While you're thinking of any questions you might have, please take some time to answer the 2 poll questions on the screen. I'll leave them up for a couple minutes after answering your questions. doesn't appear that we're going to be having any questions. So again, my apologies for the technical problems today. Not much I can do about that, but I very much appreciate your patience, and thank you so much for joining us today. Again, if you have any questions about grant writing, please contact our department. We'd be happy to help you out.